Great. Thank you very much for the introduction. I was actually hoping that somebody would say, I do know, and that was going to get me off the hook, and they would be able to come up here and do that for me. But no such luck. Either that or our people are just a little bit too shy. As I was listening to the talks this morning, realized I kind of wound the clock back about 15, 17 years to when we launched our first startup, 2001, Interface Biologics, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And realized how many of those items I knew absolutely zero about. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed from the GMP and the clinical right model and so on and so forth, don't worry about it. It's all going to come, and all those things have their spot in the stage towards marketing. And the more I work with young entrepreneurs on campus, the more I feel confirmed about that approach to things. Things will come into place. What is important is that you actually know the network of support to help and where it is and where the mentors are and where the resources are, so that you gradually start building on that. And I think the second thing is to start thinking that way, to know that down the road these questions will have to be asked, and what can I be doing today on my step towards my development, towards that pathway. So they asked me, the organizers asked me to think about what I was hoping that you would learn as you walk away, what you take away from this talk today. And there's probably 5 things here that I hope you can tell me at the end. And if you don't walk away with this, those should be your questions to me at the end, right? I may have passed it over or forgot one of my comments and so on and so forth. All right, so if you're thinking of commercializing or turning your research into a product or entrepreneurship, even going a step farther and doing it, you're not alone. Don't worry about it. It's unbelievable what's happening here in Canada. The last 10 years has been just phenomenal. If this ecosystem had existed in 1990 when I finished my PhD at McMaster, I really don't know if I would have gone in academia. It's electric from my perspective. What's unique about the U of T environment, and I pardon for those who've come from out of Toronto, there's going to be a little bit of Toronto-centric perspective here because that's what I'm most familiar with, but you can take these elements and transpose them into other jurisdictions in Canada, some places bigger, some places smaller. But I have to say we have a pretty healthy and supportive environment here. So U of T, this is evidence now to prove to you that you're not alone in thinking about this. In the last 5 years has launched about 150 to 200 successful companies that have made it, that are selling product, and they've gone through all the kinds of sorts of things that you guys heard about this morning to different levels depending on the nature of the product. The faculty and researchers, there's a cultural revolution going on. There's no doubt about it. 1990, when I arrived here at the University of Toronto, fundamental basic science was still number one. That's what you chased. This other stuff was way out there. I would argue I was director of biomedical engineering here at the university from 2008 to 2013, and it was a criteria for our recruitment. First, great science, but an interest in the translational piece, because we got a good sense that the generations were changing. Students were still in love with science and what it meant and the discovery process, but they were starting to map out different career paths, certainly than the sole academic career path. Society is driving this change. Again, over the past 10 years, this is demand from the client. The student is asking for this. The government programs are starting to say, let's start to look at our investment. In Canada here, we are always ranked within one of the top 3 G20 countries in the world that have the greatest post-secondary educated percentage among our population. Huge investment in knowledge, and yet still working at monetizing that, and that's what's driving the governments. We want to keep on investing in science and in education and whatnot, but let's start working on the other side of the pipeline as well. Here at the University of Toronto, I have to say, a huge effort in startups, and roughly 3/4 of what's coming out of U of T is student-driven at this point in time. So there's a lot of youth, and by student I mean everything from first-year undergrad to 55-year-old interns that we see. This is what the ecosystem sort of looks like. Use my pointer here if it actually works. Don't think it does. So at the top, I would say the first 3 top items is what the university has invested deeply into. 35,000 students are being exposed to some aspect, our trainees are being exposed to some aspect of entrepreneurship, productization concepts at the University of Toronto, perhaps to very low levels, early education phase, and then a substantial amount of them, probably about 1,500 students, start to get exposed to the campus-linked accelerators. There are 10 of those on campus, and I'll show them to you in a moment. Those groups, and I run one of them called the Health Innovation Hub, and we'll talk about that. It's a sole one that's totally dedicated to what you guys are talking about here today. But their role is to provide infrastructure support and mentorship support and networking support to the students the trainees who are interested in doing this. And starting at a very low level, so you can start to build your portfolio of knowledge reflecting what you learned about this morning in the system. So there's about 1,500 students that start that process called ideation. It's one step beyond education. You know what entrepreneurship and commercialization is kind of about. You got some definitions in place. Now I'm going to start thinking about doing it. Start thinking about identifying my gap, the needs, the true needs, and aligning those needs with my innovation that I've either carried out throughout my grad studies or my own next idea that is the bright light bulb idea post my grad studies. And then there's a group of them that start prototyping. That's the little orange group down there. It's about 600 of them. They actually go beyond the ideation, start making prototypes of the product, making prototypes that are going to fail. You make as many prototypes as you have to make. You want to fail early when you're not in that very expensive process that was talked about this morning, because it gets very, very costly. So the more you can fail and try in that prototyping stage, the better it's going to be. And there's about 200, I said that already, about 150 to 200 that actually incorporate, they have prototypes, they start marketing, they start building, and they're launching. And then the next level beyond there, so that's your venture building, and then scale up is typically when you're really looking for the investor money, because now you're not making 2 widgets, you're making thousands, maybe millions of widgets, and now you get into the business of really, by that point in time, you have brought on the consultants, you have done what was talked about this morning. And if you haven't, it's going to cost you dearly. So the people who can help you bring your ideas to fruition on campus here are these campus-linked accelerators. They are usually, for the most part, will support you in a non-dilutive way. That means they're not going to take a share of your intellectual property as you build the companies. And that's where you want to be in the early stage. That's where you want to be in that prototyping stage where you're failing and failing. The last thing you want to be doing is giving away portions of your value of your product that you're going to generate at that stage of the game. Because trust me, when you really do need the money, you are going to have to fork over a serious percentage of that. The ecosystem has been, as I said, evolving over the past 15 years or so. The Impact Center, which came out of the arts and sciences community first, which is run by Cynthia Go, started back in 2000, conceptually out of the original Ontario Centres of Excellence programs. The province of Ontario has been thinking about doing this and trying to convert the culture that we live in for over 20 years. I was a graduate student at McMaster University in 1986 when the Ontario Centres of Excellence came into fruition. And the academic community got it wrong. They thought the Ontario Centres of Excellence was another tri-council funding body. And they didn't realize that the government actually wanted to create a funding base to actually drive this process. And so they, after one cycle of funding, they brought in the director of R&D from CellCAN, and he turned the whole world upside down and brought the Ontario Centres of Excellence on the path that they're on today as a stimulatory support behind the deep research that the Tri-Councils are funding. And so they have driven, and in 2013, they said this impact center concept looks good. They saw a few others across the province, and campus-linked accelerators were formed. And that's why you see such a big cluster of new ones formed around 2013, 2014. And among those are the Health Innovation Hub down at the bottom right corner. That's us. There we are. We're 2 years old. And our goal is pretty simple. Basically, it's to change the local culture and practice and support those who want to productize product. That's what we do. Just to show you how I think electric the opportunity is that in our first year we had 7 companies that brought in $40K of money either from contracts, angel investors, or whatnot. This past year, 58 companies in our top 16 brought in almost most of that, $2.5 million. Now, $2.5 million is pretty small compared to the amount of investment that, something like Blue Rock got this past year, $250 million. But I can tell you that that is transformative in thinking. These are student-led companies that are driving this, that are making products, that are getting contracts, that are drawing investment, getting people to believe that there's a great idea here, and executing on it as well. So it's getting on. So the Health Innovation Hub is a campus-linked accelerator that can help you move towards your concept productization. We have clients in the service area, in the interventions area, which is a lot of what this presentation has been about with regards to biologicals and cell products and drugs, and a lot of service IT technology, so diagnostics products as well as patient outcomes products of that sort. And I'll show you the distributions and some of that a little bit later. I already talked, we probably trained about 79 companies, okay? 3 or 4 people per company roughly. The ecosystem is about 250 members or so, a little bit more than that are made up of mentors from industry. We have a big regulatory team. On the regulatory aspect this morning, one of the speakers said, keep those regulatory people really close to you. Well, we can get them really close to you. We'll get them close to you when you're at that venture stage, once you've built your prototypes and you know where you're going and what your widget looks like, so that you can have a strong conversation with them. But these are philanthropists who are giving their personal time from big companies in the area, representatives of big companies in the area, who want to see it happen in Toronto, who want to see it happen in Ontario, who want to see it happen in Canada. And it is happening. The Hub has all kinds of education programs that it runs pitch contests for product ideas and whatnot to be able to give and provide either scholarships or fellowships to maybe offset, as opposed to the students doing a TA, they can get a fellowship to run their company on the side to make ends meet. Those are the types of things that are done. We bring in speakers. We run key opinion leader sessions. So our venture capital companies, we will put them in front of 5 or 6 key opinion leaders, venture people, regulatory people, intellectual property, experts from the hospitals, and they will get feedback on their story that's simultaneous, that's in a discussion format, that's interactive for the students. Oops, I'm going backwards here. So examples of programs, we run a mini MBA. It's a crash course MBA, 8 sessions. If you go to the website, you'll probably see it advertised probably around November. It usually runs from January to early March. Get a crash course on how do you manage your finances in your company, how do you start building business development plans. The Accelerator program, I call it Alcoholics Anonymous for entrepreneurs. It's basically breakfast on a key topic. We have 10 topics that we teach, 10 things that if you're going to put a product on the market, you must know. And we teach those things to our students, but we run an Accelerator program. It's a breakfast, 1 hour, no more than 1 hour. We bring in an expert from the outside. They give a 10-minute introduction, and we go around the table, and students and young entrepreneurs just like you ask their anxiety, ask the questions that keep them awake at night. And they each teach each other how to solve problems with regards to contracts and negotiations and where to get prototypes made and where to get access to funding resources to build those prototypes and whatnot. And other activities of that nature as well. Networking is key. So just before I was introduced, our host asked, did you meet somebody new this morning here? Hopefully you met not just one person new, hopefully you met 5 new people before you leave this afternoon. Because those people, they are connected. They're connected to other people who know people that you're going to need to know at some point in time. So we work really, really hard on this. And this is the profile of our network. And you could pretty much repeat this in the different campus-linked accelerators as we go to them all. The longer they've been around, the more sophisticated they have this built up. We were very fortunate to have key people who were from industry very early on in interface biologics, probably the reason why we built this up so fast. But clinicians, venture capitals, angel groups, community partners such as OBIO, OCE, these are all people sitting with all kinds of programs that can help you create your product and move it towards the market, and industry partners. So in the Health Innovation Hub, we categorize our clients that come in 4 categories. You either know nothing about these 10 points. If you do, that's okay. You can enlist in some of the education programs. You get excited about the opportunity and an idea and concept of actually creating a product, then we can get you involved in our discovery program. And we have lead mentors for each of these. I have a colleague who takes care of the education piece. I pretty well cover Discovery 2 and early Phase 3. And then I have an ex-leader from IBM who runs 3 and 4, late 3 and 4. This guy used to take IBM technologies that were not core. They were invented and developed in their R&D programs, but they weren't core to the business. So the company wanted to recoup the investment. And it was his job to go out and build companies, find people who wanted the technology, help them build a company, and sell it off. That's what he did for a living. He's with us. He's in the trenches. He sits down with the individuals, and they sit down at least quarterly. That's the requirement. That's the only thing we ask. We take nothing on intellectual property. It's non-dilution. We just ask you that you execute on what you're here to do. So the profiles, as again I said, we have hardware, services, and interventions. And if you want to look at kind of what the relative profile of where everybody is, no surprise, we're very normal. We have a very normal distribution. We talked a bit about statistics, so we're normal. So that's a good thing. If you come to see us, we'll be talking to normal people. No surprise, the ones who are at scale up, 16% roughly are the ones who are into the bigger money, that are getting the investments, that are setting up shop in J-Labs and whatnot. But we have quite a bit in that venture group as well. And so that profile has changed quite nicely. This is our calendar of events for the year. You can find it on our website. And again, there's no cost. You just need to register. Just need to tell us what your idea is. Okay, so if you're confused this morning, this slide was put up there to confuse you totally. This is the GTA ecosystem. And my laser isn't working, but we're way up there just all the campus-linked accelerators are that big green square way up there. But we sit within this massive resource system that's all around us. Okay? And the first resource that you have is all the research dollars and money coming out of the University of Toronto and its community, its partnerships with the hospitals and whatnot, generating stuff. If I was the University of Toronto and it was to redraw this thing, I'd take those last 4 ribbons and wind them up so that they can interact. Because the reason why it's been so slow here in Canada is because the green ribbon is not intertwined with the red ribbon appropriately early enough. But that's what's happening. That is definitely what's happening. It's transformed quite substantially, and that's the good news. So maybe the next time you see this, you'll see those all wrapped up at the end and then heading out in their own way. In the far right corner up there, all the bubbles of where the hot spots are in terms of tech transfer in the GTA. So I'm not sure if these slides are going to get distributed to everybody, so you don't have to jot this down. So this is where I'm going to spend a good chunk of my time here on this time. These 10 things. How do I create a marketable product out of my science? If you cannot answer these 10 questions and you don't have a good solid story for these 10 questions, then you are prone to failure. And this is why you hear about the relative rates of failure in this field. The very first thing is clearly identifying the problem, the unmet need that needs to be solved. It needs to be a real one, okay? Not just a dreamt up one. How do you know it's a real one? Well, you go out and talk to 50 or so key opinion leaders who work in the field, right? Who can give you, they'll all have a different opinion, but you'll do a condensation of this to identify and know that you are chasing something very real that's unmet. You then obviously you have a technology that you're hoping to apply to this particular solution, and you'll need to get to know the customers. You need to know we have to do something what we call segmentation of all the people who use your product. Who will be the most likely to use your product and why? And you work on that. That's paper exercise. That's collecting data, that's doing your homework, that's costing you, other than time, it's not costing you a lot. But the more that you do, the more of your valuable invested dollars into your product prototypes and your testing and everything is going to be safe. It's going to be secure. Do this right, and you'll have the eye of investors to be putting money into you. You really need to know the size of your market. In some cases, if you're going to hold, if it's a small market, but you're going to own it all, and it's a premium product, it's a viable business. But if it's a commodity product and the market's small, there's probably 30 or 40 other competitors out there. It's not where you want to go, especially if you're coming out of this ecosystem. You're coming out with something unique. The science here is tops. We see that in our rankings every year. The innovation is unique. Capitalize on that. I can guarantee you the biggest companies don't have that in their back pocket. I used to think they had it, but after traveling in this field for a very, very long time, I know they don't have it. So you can create a value proposition, a differentiator that is needed on the market. Take a lot of time to make sure you establish that. And then lastly, once you get all the way up to the venture and scale-up phase, you need to be focusing on your competition, your financial plan, and your milestones, and you need to be very, very rigid on execution of these items. Now, if you do all these things, then you probably fall more in the entrepreneurship category than just, I'm interested in seeing my science being turned into market. There's a lot of colleagues that I know who are the partners of the entrepreneurs. But if you really want to be the entrepreneur and drive this process earlier on and whatnot, then, this is the definition, a definition of entrepreneurs, I suppose, and I think it's as good as anyone. It's as accurate as any. I want to just dispel a few myths, and by the way, some of these slides come from my colleagues at U of T Entrepreneurship, which oversees all of our CLAs, and I'll acknowledge them at the end. On average, the successful startup founders are about 40. Now, they may have started at 30, because in the healthcare sector, the average time to product is, if you're really lucky, is 5 to 10 years. That's our world. Certainly the world we talked about this morning is no faster than 5. This isn't an app that is a piece of software that's written in 6 months and turned around. And so you need to be ready for that, and you're going to have many partners helping you get there. By the time you get there, on average, you're about 40. And some other statistics. What are the characteristics? Well, I think a lot of these characteristics are very much characteristics of the average scientist. So it's entirely in your capacity to be involved in doing this. You need to be resilient. Think of your theses, that experiment that fails and fails and fails. If you're not resilient, you won't get through your theses. You need to manage risk. Well, you always design your experiments. We heard that, the importance of managing risk very early this morning. You design your experiments so that you mitigate any issues. You think about your controls, all those types of things. Designing, opportunity recognizing. How do you recognize opportunity? You do your homework. You network, you collect data. There is the odd occasion where I'm laying down in bed, and I wake up in the morning, I have a light bulb that goes on, and boom, I'm the next Facebook. There are those, but the majority aren't those. The majority is doing your homework, being ready for when the opportunity presents itself. That was my last point. This is really important. This shows you that you're not going to do this on your own. This is the success record. The top curve is those who have taken the time to build a network of mentors. The potential for successful outcomes goes up dramatically as time goes on, as you go through that process from education to ideation to venture to scale up. You need to build that network. So again, make sure you know 5 people before you leave here today. And contrary, in the early 90s, when I started getting involved in this, I used to hear a lot of my colleagues say, greedy industry, we do the science, we don't want to be chasing for the money. As it turns out, the majority of entrepreneurs do it for the impact or do it for the personal experience. 5%. It's kind of right up there with the 1% type of thing, right? So the majority of us don't do it for the money. If you do it right, there will be money, for sure. And you'll get to do it again and again. So I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of real cases. I'm not just giving you what I'm talking about here today are things that I've done and that I have lived. And it took me longer to do it. And I think I probably could have shaved about 3 years or so off of it had we had workshops like this. So you guys are really fortunate, and hats off to those who've organized this event to get us there. I do a lot of blood compatible work, biomaterials scientist, and we wanted to come up with a problem to resolve clotting on PICC catheter lines. These are lines that can be indwelling in patients for months to years. If you're a cancer patient, you're getting infusions regularly, you'll have these. They become infected because of clots forming. Clots can break off and plug up arteries downstream. It's about $1 billion cost to the U.S. healthcare system on all. A lot of people die every year as a result of this. The products that are out there are all kinds of coatings, anti-stick coatings that are lubricious, that are challenging to handle and manipulate. Some of them are drug-based systems. We looked at this in a very different way. We looked at this, would we be able to minimize the cost of manufacturing a modified version of this product at the same time as we actually make the tubing, the catheter line? And so we came up with the idea of using additives that can migrate to the surface at the same time as the tube is extruded. And those additives create a diversity of chemistry on the surface that, as it turns out, minimizes protein denaturation, clotting protein denaturation at the surface, which minimizes platelet activation, which minimizes clot formation in the material. And so the additive is a small molecular weight thing, gets put into the extruder. There's no secondary manufacturing step. We've eliminated the coating process. We've saved industry a dramatic amount of money for this. Our biggest clients are the industry. They like it so much because they don't have to change their manufacturing process. It's just an additive that they throw into their polymer resin when they make their device. So you got to be thinking about the end user. One of the places where you're going to gather is at an unmet need. You're going to talk to end users. They're going to tell you what frustrates them in the field, and those are the products you need to make. The bottom left slide is the bottom of those two catheters is our product, and the top one was the lead product on the market at the time we introduced it. And I'm making that particular point because that company owned about 90% of the market share. We have worked our way from single digit to double digit in the market. We have not yet walked away with the market. And that's because I learned a huge reality check, or I had a huge reality check, once we introduced the next thing best since sliced bread on the market. And the next thing, the better thing than your technology is to have a great marketing team and sales team. And this big company is just humongous relative to ours. So they have marketing tools, financial tools around them that keep them number one in the marketplace. It's going to be years before this life-saving device makes it in the field because of the power of marketing. So don't forget it. It's just some other data tied to that. I want to show you, this is a company that, starting with 2 postdocs in my lab, I'm not a share owner in this company. They're taking technologies of ours, but we probably shaved about 4 years off their pathway. Patients who undergo lumpectomies often elect to do a full mastectomy as opposed to a lumpectomy because there are issues around contracture and deformation of the breast when you implant it. So they designed a tissue filler material that goes in at the time of surgery, fills up, holds shape and form and volume, will degrade with time, and at the end of the day, this particular material actually enables complete regeneration of the tissue. All right. So I'm just conscious of time. I wanted to stop very near 2 o'clock, so I'm just going to show you so that we have time for questions. And I just want to show you a couple of more slides there, but they're going through exactly what we just talked about. They've sat down, they've looked at the unmet need, they talked to a whole bunch of surgeons. You can actually, the National Research Council actually gives you grants to do market assessment. Gives you grants of $20,000 to go send out a consultant to ask the questions you want to ask about your product. Costs you zero, non-dilutive to your knowledge base. And all our company, we coach most of our companies at H2I to use that tool. When they did that tool, these are all the benefits and aspects that this particular company asked about this technology out there. So now they have stats. They know which of these buttons actually turned on the end user who are going to use this product the most. So they know how to build their marketing strategy. They thought about workflow. This technology has to be used in the clinic. And if you have to change workflow, the way people are used to doing something, change it for reducing the amount of time and consumption in the process. Don't, even if it's the best thing since sliced bread, don't add another hour to the procedure because adoption will be quite limited. Right? The healthcare system is virtually broke, so it has no capacity for doing that. This is a segmentation that they did, and the last slide I'll show you here. This is some of the statements that were said when they did that market survey, from experts, from advocates. These are people so far from our little world of the lab, but so critically important in deciding, can I really turn my product, my science into product? And those are the 2 postdocs for this company. There's a clinician and myself as their scientific advisors. I want to thank Carrie Damon, who's the lead for the University of Toronto Entrepreneurship, oversees all of the campus-linked accelerators. She had a large number of her slides are in this deck. Joseph Fehrenbach, who's my co-director for the Health Innovation Hub, who helped generate quite a few of the IBH2I slides, and the slides from Interface Biologics and Polymers.